Tae-ho Kim sat in the metal chair and watched the alien judges through the thick glass wall. Their blue skin seemed to glow under the bright lights of the courtroom. He could hear them talking in their strange language, but he knew what they were saying. They were deciding the fate of his entire species. The trial had lasted 3 days. 3 days of accusations and evidence that painted humans as too dangerous to live among the other races of the galaxy. The Alien Council called it the Soul Incident, but Tae-ho remembered it differently. He had simply refused to give up Earth's mining rights to a planet that humans had discovered first. That was enough to make them enemies of the Galactic Union. "The decision is made," announced the lead judge, a tall creature with 4 arms and silver eyes. "Humanity poses a threat to galactic peace. They are too violent, too stubborn, too unpredictable. They cannot be allowed to roam free among civilized species." Tae-ho stood up slowly. "And what do you plan to do with us?" The judge's silver eyes seemed to shine brighter. "Exile. All humans will be transported to Kythera 7. There you will have a chance to prove that your species can change." Tae-ho had heard of Kythera 7. Every space traveler knew the stories. It was a death planet where the gravity could crush bones and the air could burn lungs. No species had ever survived there for more than 6 months. The aliens were not offering exile. They were offering execution with extra steps. "How many of us?" Tae-ho asked. "All of you. 5,000 humans from across the galaxy will be gathered and sent to Kythera 7. If any survive 1 year, we will consider allowing your species back into Union space." Tae-ho wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to do something, but there were no options left. The Union had already decided. They would gather every human they could find and dump them on a planet designed to kill them. 3 weeks later, Tae-ho found himself on a massive transport ship with 4,999 other humans. The ship was not built for comfort. It was built to carry cargo, and that was exactly how the aliens treated them. People were packed into metal rooms with barely enough space to lie down. The air recycling systems worked poorly, and the food tasted like cardboard. Do-hyun Lee sat next to Tae-ho in the cramped quarters. The young man was only 25, a medical student who had been studying on an alien world when the order came down. His hands shook as he read reports about Kythera 7 on a small data pad. "The gravity is more than twice what we're used to," Do-hyun said quietly. "The atmosphere has toxic elements that will damage our lungs over time. The storms can last for days and carry acid rain." Nari Park, an engineer from the military, looked up from where she was studying the ship's layout. "Stop reading that stuff. It won't help us survive." "Knowledge always helps," said Sunmi Choi, the communications expert. She was older than the rest of them, maybe 40, with gray streaks in her black hair. "We need to know what we're facing." Hyun-soo Jang nodded from his corner. The former soldier had been quiet for most of the trip, but his eyes were always watching, always planning. "Sunmi is right. We can't fight what we don't understand." Tae-ho listened to his fellow humans talk and felt something strange. Despite everything that had happened, despite the certain death waiting for them, they were not giving up. They were making plans, sharing knowledge, preparing to fight for their lives. The transport ship took 2 months to reach Kythera 7. During that time, the 5,000 humans organized themselves into groups. Tae-ho found himself leading one of the largest groups, not because he wanted to, but because people kept coming to him with problems and questions. "We need to spread out when we land," he told the group leaders during one of their meetings. "If we all stay in one place, we'll exhaust the local resources too quickly." Nari had drawn up plans for basic shelters using materials they might find on the planet. "The storms will be our biggest enemy at first. We need underground protection." Do-hyun had been talking to the other medical personnel. "We'll need to be careful about the air. Short exposure might be okay, but breathing it for months will slowly poison us." When they finally saw Kythera 7 through the transport's windows, it looked like a nightmare painted in red and black. The planet's surface was covered in jagged mountains and deep valleys. Strange storms moved across the landscape like living things, flashing with unnatural colors. The aliens did not land the transport. Instead, they dropped the humans in small pods scattered across a continent-sized area. Tae-ho's pod crashed hard into rocky ground, and he felt his ribs crack from the impact. The gravity hit him immediately, making every movement difficult and painful. He struggled out of the pod and looked around. The sky was a sick yellow color and the air smelled like burning metal. In the distance, he could see other pods scattered across the landscape. Some were smoking. Some were not moving at all. His radio crackled to life. It was Sunmi's voice, distorted by static. Group leaders, report in. How many pods made it down safely? One by one, voices reported in. Out of the 100 pod groups, only 67 were responding. The planet had already killed over 1,500 humans before they even had a chance to fight. Tejo activated his beacon and started walking toward the nearest pod. His legs felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds each, and every breath burned his throat. But he kept moving because that was what humans did. They kept moving forward, no matter what tried to stop them. Over the following days, the survivors managed to gather in small groups scattered across the hostile continent. They built shelters from wreckage and found ways to filter the toxic air. They learned to move during the calm periods between storms and hide when the weather turned violent. But the planet was patient and cruel. It killed them slowly, one by one. Equipment failed in ways that should have been impossible. Food supplies spoiled faster than they should have. People got sick from breathing the air, drinking the filtered water, even from touching the wrong rocks. After 6 months, half the humans were dead. After a year, only a few hundred remained. After 18 months, the number had dropped to dozens. Tejo lasted longer than most, but even he could not fight forever. He died during a particularly bad storm, holding Do-hyun's hand in a makeshift shelter that was falling apart around them. Promise me something, Tejo whispered, as his breathing became shallow. If you survive this, if you're the last one, make them remember what they threw away. Make them remember that we were people, not problems. Do-hyun nodded, tears mixing with the toxic rain that leaked through their failing roof. I promise. 3 days later, Do-hyun buried the last of his friends and stood alone on the surface of Kithara 7. The planet stretched endlessly around him, red and hostile and seemingly lifeless. But he was still breathing, still standing, still human. The aliens had been wrong about one thing. Humans could survive on Kithara 7. At least one human could. Do-hyun stood over the grave he had dug for Tejo and felt the weight of silence press down on him. For 18 months there had always been voices, always been people to talk to, plans to make, hopes to share. Now there was only the wind and the distant rumble of another storm building on the horizon. The loneliness hit him harder than the gravity ever had. He sat down next to the grave, his bones aching from the constant strain of living on this world, and tried to decide if he should keep fighting or just lie down and let Kithara 7 finally win. But something deep inside him refused to quit. Maybe it was Tejo's final words, or maybe it was just the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. Do-hyun stood up, shouldered his pack, and started walking toward the mountains where he had seen strange lights during the last storm. The first thing he noticed was that walking was getting easier. Not easy, but easier. His legs felt stronger than they had a month ago, and his breathing was not as labored. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but after a week of traveling, he was sure. His body was changing. The changes were small at first. His bones stopped aching all the time. His muscles felt denser, more efficient. His lungs seemed to process the toxic air better, filtering out more of the harmful elements. He could walk for hours without the exhaustion that had plagued him during the first months on Kithara 7, but the physical changes were nothing compared to what happened when he reached the crystal caves. The caves were hidden in a mountain range that looked like broken glass reaching toward the sick yellow sky. Do-hyun had seen the lights from these caves during storms, but getting close to them had been impossible when he was traveling with others. The journey was too dangerous, the path too uncertain. Now, alone and with his improved stamina, he could finally explore. The entrance to the caves was a crack in the mountain barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Inside, the walls were covered with crystals that glowed with soft blue light. The light pulsed slowly like a heartbeat, and Do-hyun felt something strange as he walked deeper into the cave system. The crystals were singing, not singing with voices, but with something that bypassed his ears and spoke directly to his mind. The sound was beautiful and alien, and it filled him with a sense of peace he had not felt since before the exile. He followed the crystal song deeper into the mountain, through passages that twisted and turned like the inside of a giant shell. After hours of walking, he emerged into a vast underground chamber. The walls, floor, and ceiling were completely covered in crystals, and the light they gave off was so bright it was like being inside a star. At the center of the chamber was a pool of water so clear it looked like liquid glass. Do-hyun approached the pool carefully. The water looked pure, cleaner than anything he had seen on Kythera 7, but he had learned not to trust anything on this planet. He knelt by the edge and cupped a small amount in his hands. It felt warm and seemed to tingle against his skin. The crystal song grew louder, more complex, and suddenly Do-hyun understood. The crystals were not just singing. They were trying to communicate. He drank from the pool. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Images flooded his mind, memories that were not his own, knowledge from a species that had lived and died millions of years ago. He saw Kythera 7 as it had been before the storms, before the toxic air, before it became a death world. He saw vast cities of crystal and metal, populated by beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form eons ago. The beings in the crystals had been waiting. They had turned their world into a testing ground, a place where only the strongest, most adaptable species could survive. They were looking for inheritors, beings who could bond with their technology and carry on their legacy among the stars. Every species the Galactic Union had sent to Kythera 7 had failed the test. They died too quickly, gave up too easily, could not adapt to the planet's challenges. But humans were different. Humans had something the crystal beings had never seen before: the absolute refusal to surrender, even when surrender was the logical choice. Do-hyun spent days in the crystal chamber, learning from the ancient memories stored in the walls. He discovered that the toxic storms were not natural weather patterns, but part of the testing process. The crushing gravity was artificial, generated by machines buried deep in the planet's core. Even the poisonous air was carefully maintained to create the exact level of challenge needed to force evolution. The planet had been trying to kill the humans, but it had also been trying to change them. And in Do-hyun, finally, the process had worked. Over the following months, the changes in his body accelerated. His bones became denser but somehow lighter, able to handle the gravity without the constant strain. His muscles restructured themselves, becoming more efficient and powerful. His nervous system rewired itself to process the psychic interference from the crystals, eventually learning to use that interference as a form of communication. But the most important change was in his mind. The crystal beings had left behind not just memories, but knowledge. Technical specifications for machines that could reshape matter at the molecular level, blueprints for weapons that could channel the planet's energy, instructions for biotechnology that could bond with human neural patterns. Do-hyun learned to work with the ancient machines buried throughout the planet. He discovered that the storms could be controlled, their energy harnessed and directed. The crystal network that covered Kythera 7 responded to his thoughts, allowing him to monitor the entire planet from the comfort of the underground chamber. 3 years passed in the crystal caves. 3 years of learning, growing, and preparing for what he knew must eventually come. The Galactic Union would send scouts to confirm that humanity was extinct. They would want to see the bones, to verify that their perfect execution method had worked. They would find something very different from what they expected. Do-hyun emerged from the caves changed in ways that went far beyond the physical. He was still human, still carried the memories of his friends and the pain of their loss, but he had become something more. The planet that had killed 4,999 humans had forged the survivor into a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, stood on a cliff overlooking the wasteland where his people had died, and felt the crystal network pulse beneath his feet. The storms responded to his call. The ancient machines hummed with power, and for the first time since the exile began, Do-hyun smiled. The aliens had wanted to test humanity's ability to adapt and survive. They had gotten their answer, but they were not going to like it. Kythera 7 was no longer a death world. It was his world, and anyone who came looking for human bones would instead find something that would give them nightmares for the rest of their lives. The crystal song echoed through his mind, and Do-hyun began to plan. The Galactic Union had sent thousands of humans to die on this planet. Soon he would return the favor, but he would not need thousands. He would not even need hundreds. One human would be enough. Do-hyun walked through the crystal caves like a man returning home after a long journey. The ancient network recognized him now, responding to his thoughts and emotions as if they were old friends sharing a conversation. He could feel the entire planet through the crystal connections, every storm, every mountain, every hidden machine waiting in the depths. The knowledge from the crystal beings had given him blueprints, but now he needed to build. The Galactic Union would eventually send ships to check on their human problem, and when they arrived, he wanted to be ready. The first project was shelter, not just for himself, but for the weapons and machines he would need to construct. Using the ancient technology, he began carving out spaces deep in the mountain, chambers that could withstand anything the planet or visiting aliens could throw at them. The work was slow but precise, each room designed for a specific purpose. In the largest chamber, he built manufacturing equipment using crystal technology and salvaged materials from the crashed human pods. The machines looked like nothing any species in the galaxy had seen before, part organic, part mechanical, all powered by the planet's vast energy network. They could shape metal and crystal at the molecular level, creating materials stronger than anything in Union databases. The second chamber became his workshop, where he experimented with the biotechnology the crystal beings had left behind. The most interesting discovery was a substance that could bond with human neural tissue, creating a direct link between mind and machine. Do-hyun tested it on himself first, injecting small amounts into his nervous system and monitoring the results. The effect was incredible. With the bio-interface active, he could control the planet's systems through thought alone. Storm patterns shifted at his command. The artificial gravity generators responded to his mental instructions. Even the toxic composition of the atmosphere could be adjusted with concentrated focus, but the real breakthrough came when he realized he could extend this control beyond the planet itself. During his 4th year alone, Do-hyun detected the approach of a Union scout ship. The vessel was small, designed for quick reconnaissance missions, probably sent to take pictures of human bones for the official records. He watched it enter the system through the crystal network's sensors and felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. Instead of destroying the scout ship immediately, he decided to test his new capabilities. The ship landed near what had been one of the larger human settlements, its crew protected by environment suits and armed with standard Union weapons. Do-hyun could have killed them all from his cave, but that would not serve his larger purpose. He needed information about the current state of the galaxy, and more importantly, he needed to send a message. Moving through the landscape was easy now. The gravity that had once threatened to crush him felt natural, and the toxic air no longer bothered his modified lungs. He approached the scout team's position like a ghost, using the crystal network to monitor their communications and movements. The aliens were exactly what he expected. 2 Velkar scouts with blue skin and silver eyes, armed with energy weapons and recording equipment. They moved through the ruins of the human settlement, taking pictures of bones and broken equipment while making notes about the effectiveness of their exile strategy. "Complete extinction confirmed," one of them said into a recording device. "No signs of recent human activity. The Deathworld solution appears to have been successful." Do-hyun stepped out from behind a collapsed shelter, and both aliens spun toward him with their weapons raised. For a moment, nobody moved. The aliens stared at the human who should not exist, while Do-hyun studied the representatives of the species that had murdered his friends. "You seem surprised to see me," Do-hyun said calmly. His voice was different now, carrying harmonics from the crystal network that made it sound like multiple people speaking at once. The first alien fired his weapon. The energy beam struck Do-hyun in the chest and dissipated harmlessly against his modified skin. He looked down at the scorch mark on his clothes and sighed. That was rude. What happened next took less than 10 seconds. Do-hyun moved faster than the aliens could track, his enhanced muscles and bones allowing him to cross the distance between them in a single bound. He touched each alien on the forehead, and the bio-interface technology flowed from his fingertips into their nervous systems. The aliens collapsed, but they were not dead. The bio-interface had created a connection between their minds and Do-hyun's, allowing him to access their memories while implanting new ones. He learned about the current political situation in Union space, the locations of military bases, the names and positions of the leaders who had ordered humanity's extinction. When the process was complete, the aliens woke up with modified memories. As far as they knew, they had spent 3 days on Cathara 7, found nothing but bones and ruins, and confirmed the complete extinction of humanity. They would report this to their superiors and recommend that the planet be marked as successfully sterilized. Do-hyun watched their ship leave and felt a grim satisfaction. He now had detailed intelligence about Union military capabilities, and several years to prepare for the next phase of his plan. The aliens thought they had solved their human problem, but they had actually created something far worse than anything they had imagined. Over the following months, Do-hyun transformed Cathara-7 into a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. He built orbital defense platforms that drew power from the planet's core and could fire concentrated storm energy across vast distances. The ancient manufacturing systems produced weapons and armor, designed specifically for human physiology, gear that would bond with a wearer's nervous system and enhance their natural abilities. In the deepest parts of the crystal network, he constructed something the alien creators had never imagined: a planetary consciousness interface. Using this system, he could literally control Cathara-7 like a massive starship, adjusting its orbit, directing its storms, even moving it through space if necessary. But the most important work was psychological preparation. Do-hyun spent hours in meditation, connecting with the memories and personalities of his dead friends through recordings and personal items he had collected from their graves. He would not let their deaths be forgotten, and he would not let their sacrifice be meaningless. Taeho's diplomatic training helped him plan his approach to the Union leadership. Nari's engineering expertise guided his weapon designs. Sunmi's communications knowledge would be crucial for the propaganda war to come. Even Do-hyun's own medical background proved useful as he modified his body to survive what he knew would be intense combat. 6 years after the last human had supposedly died on Cathara-7, Do-hyun stood in his command chamber and activated the planetary movement systems. The crystal network sang with power as ancient engines buried in the planet's core came online for the first time in millions of years. Slowly, carefully, Cathara-7 began to move out of its orbit and toward the edge of Union space. The journey would take months, but Do-hyun was patient. He had learned patience from the crystal beings, and he had learned determination from his fellow humans. The Galactic Union had sent 5,000 people to die on a Deathworld, believing that would solve their human problem forever. They were about to discover that they had not eliminated humanity. They had created something infinitely more dangerous: a human with nothing left to lose and the power of an entire planet at his command. The last phase of the test was about to begin, and this time, the aliens would be the ones being tested. The first Union patrol to detect Cathara-7 moving through space thought their sensors were broken. Planets did not simply leave their orbits and travel between star systems. It was impossible, a violation of every law of physics they understood. But the readings were confirmed by 3 different ships, and within hours, every major government in Union space knew that the human Deathworld was somehow traveling toward their territory under its own power. Do-hyun monitored their communications through the crystal network, listening to the panic and confusion spreading through Union command structures. He could have announced his presence immediately, but he preferred to let their fear build. Fear would make them more likely to listen when he finally revealed himself. The planet's approach was slow but steady, giving Union leaders time to debate their response. Some wanted to destroy Cathara-7 with long-range weapons before it reached inhabited systems. Others argued that they needed to investigate what had caused a planet to become mobile. A few wise voices suggested that perhaps their human problem had not been solved as completely as they believed. When Cathara-7 reached the edge of Union territory, Do-hyun finally made contact. He used every communication channel simultaneously, ensuring that his message would reach every government, every military base, every civilian population center in Union space. The transmission began with a simple statement: "I am Do-hyun Lee, last survivor of humanity's exile to Cathara-7. I return not for revenge, but for justice." The image that appeared on screens across the galaxy showed a man who looked human but had clearly been changed by his years on the Deathworld. His eyes held depths that seemed to reflect the crystal caves, and his voice carried harmonics that made listeners feel as if the planet itself were speaking through him. 7 years ago, your Union sentenced 5,000 humans to death for the crime of being difficult to control. You called us too violent, too stubborn, too unpredictable to live among civilized species. Today I return to show you what your civilization has created through its fear and hatred. Union leaders tried to jam the transmission, but Do-hyun was broadcasting through systems they did not understand, using technology that predated their civilization by millions of years. Every attempt to stop him failed. I do not come as a conqueror, Du-hyun continued. I come as the voice of 4,999 people who died because you were afraid of what they might become. I come to ensure that no other species suffers the fate you inflicted on humanity. To demonstrate his power, Do-hyun directed one of Cathera 7's storm systems into space. The energy discharge was visible from planets dozens of light-years away, a spiral of lightning and force that dwarfed anything in Union military arsenals. Then he pulled the storm back to the planet's surface, showing that the display was controlled and purposeful. The Union's response was predictable. They sent their most powerful battle fleet to intercept Cathera 7, hoping to destroy the planet before it could reach any populated systems. The fleet consisted of over 300 ships, including the massive dreadnoughts that served as the backbone of Union military power. Do-hyun watched them approach and felt a mixture of sadness and determination. These beings were about to learn the same lesson his people had learned on Cathera 7, that some challenges could not be defeated through superior numbers or advanced technology. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 6 hours. Do-hyun did not try to destroy the Union fleet. Instead, he demonstrated that their weapons were useless against technology they could not comprehend. Storm energy deflected their most powerful missiles. Gravitational fields generated by the planet's core pulled ships out of formation and held them helpless. When Union forces tried to land troops on Cathera 7's surface, they discovered that the planet's atmosphere had been weaponized, creating zones of toxic gas that could disable even fully protected soldiers. But the most devastating weapon was Do-hyun himself. Using shuttles built from crystal technology, he boarded Union ships and moved through them like a force of nature. His modified body could survive in vacuum, resist energy weapons, and move with speed that made him nearly impossible to track. But instead of killing the crews, he used the bio-interface technology to connect with their minds. Each alien he touched experienced a simulation of life on Cathera 7. They felt the crushing gravity, breathed the poisonous air, watched friends die from exposure and starvation. Most importantly, they experienced the gradual realization that their suffering was not accidental, but deliberately designed by beings who viewed them as expendable test subjects. The psychological impact was devastating. Trained soldiers broke down in tears as they understood what humanity had endured. Ship commanders abandoned their attacks and began broadcasting messages calling for immediate ceasefire. Within hours, the entire Union fleet was demanding that their leaders negotiate with the human survivor. Do-hyun accepted their surrender, but did not trust their promises. Instead, he did something that terrified Union leadership more than any military defeat. He began broadcasting the personal stories of the humans who had died on Cathera 7. Using recordings and memories he had preserved, Do-hyun shared the final messages of people like Taiho, Nari, Sunmi, and Hyunsu. He showed the galaxy who these people had been before their exile, what they had accomplished, what they had dreamed of achieving. He made it impossible for the Union to dismiss them as dangerous monsters or acceptable casualties. The propaganda war was more effective than any weapon. Across Union space, populations began demanding answers from their governments. How could their leaders have ordered the deaths of people who seemed so ordinary, so relatable? Why had an entire species been condemned for the actions of a few diplomats? Some Union worlds went further, declaring independence from the central government and offering asylum to any humans who might have survived the purges. Others began investigating what other species had been sent to die on remote worlds for the crime of being. Inconvenient to Union politics, Do-hyun watched the political chaos from his command chamber on Cathera 7 and felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. This was what Taiho would have wanted. Not conquest through violence, but change through truth and justice. The Union was tearing itself apart as populations learned what had been done in their name. But the work was not finished. Union military forces were regrouping, and some leaders were calling for total war against the human threat. They had learned nothing from their defeat and were preparing to repeat their mistakes on an even larger scale. Do-hyun opened a channel to every Union government simultaneously and made his final offer. You have one choice remaining. You can continue this war and discover what a human with nothing left to lose can accomplish with the power of an entire planet. Or you can accept that your old system of fear and control has failed and work with me to build something better. He paused, letting his words sink in across the galaxy. I give you 7 days to decide. After that, I will assume that you have chosen war, and I will respond accordingly. Remember that I have already died once on your Deathworld. I have nothing left to fear. The transmission ended, leaving Union space in chaos. Some governments called for immediate surrender. Others demanded a fight to the death. Most simply waited, hoping that someone else would make the decision for them. Do-hyun counted down the days and prepared for whatever choice the galaxy would make. He had kept his promise to Taeho. The Union would never forget what they had thrown away. Now it remained to be seen whether they would learn from their mistake or repeat it on an even grander scale. On the 7th day, Do-hyun received an unexpected message. It came not from Union Military Command or the central government, but from a coalition of worlds that had declared independence during the chaos of the past week. Their representative was a young Velkar female named Zara, who spoke with the careful precision of someone delivering the most important message of her life. Do-hyun Lee of humanity, she began. We speak for 47 worlds that reject the Union's policy of extinction. We offer unconditional surrender to you personally and request your protection from retaliation. Do-hyun studied her image on his communication screen and saw something he had not expected. Genuine remorse. This was not a political calculation or a strategic maneuver. This alien understood what her people had done and wanted to make it right. What do you propose? Do-hyun asked. Complete restructuring of galactic government. No more exile protocols. No more extinction orders. Representation for all species, including those the Union considers dangerous or difficult. And most importantly, a memorial for the 4,999 humans who died because of our fear and ignorance. Do-hyun closed his eyes and felt the crystal network pulse around him. Through the ancient consciousness embedded in the planet, he could sense the memories of his friends, their hopes and dreams preserved in the very structure of Cathara 7. What would Taeho have wanted? What would Nari, Sunmi, and Hyunsu have chosen? The answer came to him with perfect clarity. They would have wanted the killing to stop. They would have wanted a galaxy where no other species would face humanity's fate. I accept your proposal, Do-hyun said finally, but I have conditions. The negotiations took 3 months and involved representatives from over 200 worlds. Do-hyun participated through holographic projection. His image transmitted across the galaxy from his command chamber on Cathara 7. He could have traveled to the talks in person, but the symbolism of the mobile Deathworld hanging in space above the negotiation site was too valuable to abandon. The final agreement, known as the Cathara Accords, transformed galactic civilization more completely than any war could have achieved. The old Union government was dissolved, replaced by a confederation where every species had equal representation, regardless of their military power or economic influence. The exile protocols were not just abolished but made into crimes against sapience, punishable by the same fate the condemned species would have faced. But the most important change was philosophical. The galaxy officially recognized that diversity of thought and behavior was a strength rather than a threat. Species that had been considered too aggressive, too unpredictable, or too different were invited to participate fully in galactic society for the first time. Do-hyun established the Guardian Corps, an organization dedicated to protecting species facing extinction or persecution. The Corps was headquartered on Cathara 7, which became a training ground where volunteers from across the galaxy learned to survive in hostile environments and adapt to impossible challenges. The process was brutal but voluntary. Candidates faced modified versions of the trials that had killed 4,999 humans, but with safeguards and support systems that gave them a chance to succeed. Those who completed the training became guardians, elite protectors who could survive in any environment and defend the defenseless anywhere in the galaxy. The first class of guardians included survivors from a dozen species that had been marked for extinction by the old Union. They called themselves the Kithra Sworn and took an oath to ensure that no species would ever again face the choice between exile and submission. Do-hyun trained them personally, sharing the hard-won knowledge of survival and adaptation that had kept him alive on the Deathworld. But more importantly, he taught them the human philosophy that had made their training possible. The absolute refusal to surrender in the face of injustice, no matter how impossible the odds might seem. As the new galactic order took shape, exploration teams began searching for other humans who might have survived the Union's purges. They found small populations on remote worlds, hidden colonies that had escaped detection, even a few individuals who had been living in disguise among alien populations. The human species slowly began to recover from near extinction. Do-hyun welcomed each group of survivors personally, but he noticed that they looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and unease. He had become something beyond their understanding, a human transformed by forces they could barely comprehend. He was their savior and their protector, but he was no longer truly one of them. The loneliness he had felt during his years alone on Kythera 7 returned, but now it was different. He was surrounded by people who respected and admired him, but none who could truly understand what he had become. The crystal consciousness offered companionship of a sort, but it was not the same as human friendship. 5 years after the Kythera Accords were signed, Do-hyun made a decision that surprised everyone who thought they knew him. He announced that he would not serve as supreme leader or emperor of the new Galactic Confederation. Instead, he would remain on Kythera 7 as the guardian of the exiled, a position that would allow him to continue protecting endangered species while honoring the memory of his fallen friends. The crystal chambers deep in the planet became a memorial to the 4,999 humans who had died during the exile. Their names were inscribed in living crystal that would preserve their memory for millions of years. Do-hyun spoke to them regularly, sharing news of the changing galaxy and asking for guidance when difficult decisions arose. The galaxy remembered the story of the human who had survived the impossible and changed everything through sheer stubborn determination. Children of a dozen species learned about Do-hyun Lee and the friends who had died beside him, and they understood that true strength came not from weapons or numbers, but from the refusal to let injustice stand unopposed. But perhaps the most important legacy was practical rather than inspirational. The Kythera training programs continued to produce guardians who carried human philosophy to every corner of the galaxy. When other species faced extinction or persecution, they found protectors who had learned the most important human lesson, that adaptation and determination could overcome any obstacle. Do-hyun stood in the memorial chamber, 20 years after his return to the galaxy, and felt the crystal network pulse with satisfaction around him. Through the ancient consciousness, he could sense guardians operating throughout known space, protecting the weak and standing against injustice wherever they found it. A holographic image of Tae-ho flickered to life beside him, reconstructed from memories and recordings preserved in the crystal matrix. "You kept your promise," the image said with a smile that looked heartbreakingly real. "They remember what they threw away and they'll never throw it away again." Do-hyun nodded, feeling tears he had not shed in years running down his face. "The galaxy is safer now. No one else will face what we faced. That's all we ever wanted," Tae-ho replied. "The chance to make things better for the people who come after us." The hologram faded, but Do-hyun could still feel the presence of his friends in the crystal network around him. They were gone, but their legacy lived on in every guardian who stood against tyranny, in every species that had been saved from extinction, in every child who learned that even the most impossible situation could be overcome through human determination. The Galactic Union had sent 5,000 humans to die on a Deathworld, believing that would solve their problem forever. Instead, they had created something that would protect the galaxy for generations to come, the knowledge that ordinary people could become extraordinary when they refused to accept injustice. Do-hyun returned to his work, monitoring guardian operations across the galaxy and preparing for the next crisis that would require intervention. He was no longer the last human, but he remained what Kythera 7 had made him, a guardian of the exiled, a protector of the condemned, and a living reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy was a human with nothing left to lose.